Welcome back to Nickel Coin PK. Today we're stepping into the fascinating world of Lincoln Wheat Pennies, small old coins that might look completely ordinary, but some have become incredibly valuable treasures. Imagine finding one of these pennies in an old collection, a forgotten jar, or even your pocket change, only to discover that collectors are willing to pay a fortune for it. Over the years, certain rare wheat pennies have reached astonishing prices, with some selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. In this countdown, we're revealing the top 3 most valuable Lincoln Wheat pennies. But don't just focus on the date, look closely at the tiny details, because a rare mint mark, error, or unusual feature could completely change a coin's value. So, if you enjoy rare coins, incredible discoveries, and hidden treasures, make sure you're subscribed to Nickel Coin PK now. Let's start with coin number 1. Imagine opening an old coin collection and discovering a Lincoln Wheat penny dated 1950, then turning it slightly under the light and noticing the small S mint mark beneath the date. Suddenly, this is no longer just another old penny. You are looking at a coin struck at the San Francisco Mint during an important period in American history, a time when the classic Lincoln wheat cent was still part of everyday life and millions of these small copper coins were moving through stores, banks, pockets, cash registers, and households across the country. The 1950 S Lincoln wheat penny is especially interesting because the S mint mark gives the coin a distinct identity and separates it from the Philadelphia and Denver issues of the same year. But the most important question is not simply whether the coin has an S. The real question is how well this particular coin survived. If your 1950 S penny has what you describe as very good condition, then you should look much more closely before deciding what it is worth. Examine Lincoln's portrait, the date, the lettering, the surface texture, and especially the small details that circulation tends to erase first. Look at the hair above Lincoln's ear, the contours of his face, the sharpness around his coat, and the definition of the letters. Then turn the coin over and study the famous wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent and United States of America. A coin that has survived with strong details, attractive natural color, and relatively clean surfaces can be much more appealing to collectors than a heavily worn example of the exact same date and mint. This is what makes old wheat pennies so fascinating. The value is not hiding in the date alone. It is hidden in the combination of date, mint mark, condition, surface quality, originality, and collector demand. The 1950S is therefore a coin that deserves careful examination rather than a quick glance, because the tiny S beneath the date is only the beginning of the story. Nearly 8 decades of history are contained in that small piece of copper, and the condition of the surviving coin can determine how interesting it becomes to the modern collector. Now take a closer look at that S mint mark, because it is one of the first details that should be verified when examining this particular wheat penny. The small letter S beneath the date indicates that the coin was struck at San Francisco, and collectors treat the different mint issues as distinct varieties within the same year. A 1950 Philadelphia cent has no mint mark, a Denver example carries a D, and the San Francisco example carries the S that you are looking for. Once you confirm the mint mark, the next step is to stop thinking about the coin as simply an old penny and start thinking like a collector or grader. Condition is everything when comparing examples. Your description of very good condition suggests a coin that has retained meaningful detail and remains visually attractive, but you should carefully compare what you see with established grading standards rather than relying only on a general phrase such as very good. In the world of coin collecting, small differences in wear can separate one grade from another, and those differences can affect value. Look carefully at the highest points of Lincoln's portrait. If the hair details are still visible, if the cheek and jaw remain clearly defined, and if the lettering is strong, the coin may have considerable remaining detail. On the reverse, inspect the wheat ears and the lines within the stalks. These areas can show exactly how much circulation the coin has experienced. Also examine the open fields for scratches, contact marks, stains, discoloration, and signs of cleaning. Old copper coins can be surprisingly sensitive, and an attempt to make the surface shiny can actually reduce collector appeal. A naturally aged surface is generally preferable to a coin that has been polished or chemically treated. If the coin has a pleasant brown or reddish-brown appearance and the color looks natural, that can add to its overall eye appeal. Do not assume that a bright, shiny surface is automatically better. In fact, an unnaturally bright old cent may raise questions about whether it has been cleaned. A serious evaluation should consider every feature together: the date, the S mint mark, the amount of wear, the strike, the color, the surface quality, and the overall visual impression. That is why experienced collectors can spend considerable time examining what appears to be a simple 1-cent coin. Every tiny detail provides another piece of evidence about how the coin was made, used, stored, and preserved. The story becomes even more interesting when you think about what happened to the 1950 S Lincoln wheat pennies after they left the San Francisco Mint. These coins were created as money, not as collectibles. They were expected to circulate, and that meant they were exposed to the ordinary hazards of everyday life. A penny could be dropped onto a sidewalk, carried in a pocket beside keys and other coins, placed on a counter, rolled across a table, or stored for years in a damp environment. Every contact could leave a tiny mark, and every year of circulation could soften another piece of detail. That is why surviving condition matters so much today. A coin can have been produced in large quantities and still be difficult to locate in unusually attractive condition. Collectors often describe this phenomenon as condition rarity because the original production number does not tell the entire story of how many high-quality examples remain. Imagine millions of 1950 cents entering circulation and then picture what happened to them over the next several decades. Some were spent repeatedly until the design became worn, some were damaged, some were lost forever, some were cleaned. Some were placed in albums or collections and protected from the beginning. The result is a population of surviving coins with dramatically different levels of preservation. If your example has very good detail, attractive natural color, and clean surfaces, it may deserve more attention than an average worn specimen. This is also where professional grading can become useful. A reputable grading service can authenticate the coin and assign a standardized grade, giving collectors a more reliable way to compare it with other certified examples. However, certification does not magically make every old penny valuable. The grade has to reflect the actual condition of the coin, and market demand still matters. This is why you should never clean your coin before having it evaluated. Cleaning can leave microscopic scratches across the surface, remove original patina, and permanently change the appearance. Once the original surface is damaged, there is no simple way to reverse the process. If your 1950s penny has survived with attractive, untouched surfaces, protecting that originality may be one of the smartest things you can do. Put it in a proper holder, handle it by the edges, and avoid unnecessary contact with the faces of the coin. Sometimes preserving what you already have is much more valuable than trying to make the coin look different. Another fascinating part of the 1950s wheat penny story is the question of color. When collectors examine old copper cents, they often pay close attention to whether the coin displays natural brown, reddish brown, or red characteristics. Copper changes naturally as it ages, and the color of a coin can provide clues about its storage and surface history. A coin that has been protected from environmental exposure may retain more original reddish color, while another coin may develop deeper brown tones over time. Neither appearance should automatically be labeled good or bad without examining the entire coin. The important question is whether the color is natural and whether the surfaces remain original. A very attractive old cent with pleasing natural coloration can be much more desirable than one that has been artificially brightened. This is why collectors are often suspicious of coins that look unnaturally shiny for their age. If you have a 1950s Lincoln wheat penny in very good condition, examine it under neutral lighting and slowly rotate it. Look for consistent color across the fields, inspect the areas around Lincoln's portrait, and check the reverse between the wheat stalks. Notice whether the surfaces have the soft appearance associated with naturally aged copper or whether there are obvious signs of polishing. You should also look for small spots or environmental damage. Even tiny areas of corrosion can affect the appeal of an old copper coin. At the same time, don't become discouraged by normal aging. A coin does not need to look brand new to be valuable or collectible. In fact, the entire appeal of a wheat penny comes partly from its age and history. The goal is to determine how well it has preserved its original characteristics, not to erase evidence that it has been around for generations. If the coin appears unusually sharp and attractive, comparison with professionally graded examples can help you understand where it stands. You may discover that what you initially thought was simply a nice old penny has stronger details than expected. And if the coin turns out to have an especially desirable combination of condition, color, and surface quality, then professional authentication could be an important next step. A certified coin is easier for serious buyers to evaluate because the grade provides a standardized reference point. That does not guarantee a particular selling price, but it can make the coin's condition much easier to understand. Of course, the biggest question remains: what is the 1950s Lincoln wheat penny actually worth? The answer depends heavily on the specific condition of the coin, and this is where it is important to separate realistic collector value from sensational claims. A normal circulated 1950s penny is not automatically worth an enormous amount simply because it is old or because it carries an S mint mark. The coin's value rises as condition, preservation, rarity, and demand become more favorable. A worn example and a sharply preserved example can belong to completely different sections of the market. If your coin is described as being in very good condition, that is a positive starting point, but it is still necessary to determine its precise grade and inspect the surfaces before making a serious valuation. A coin dealer, professional numismatist, or grading service can help with that process. You should also look at actual completed auction sales rather than relying on online advertisements. Anyone can place a huge asking price on a coin, but that does not mean somebody will actually pay it. Completed transactions provide a much better indication of what collectors have been willing to spend on comparable examples. This is especially important with old wheat pennies because internet searches often produce sensational headlines that mix ordinary coins with extremely rare, high-grade examples. If you see a claim that a certain 1950s penny is worth an astonishing amount, look for the details behind that claim. What grade did the coin receive? Was it professionally certified? Was the color designation documented? Was the sale actually completed? Was there a special variety or error involved? Without those details, the headline alone tells you very little. Your own coin should be evaluated on its individual characteristics. If it has strong details, original surfaces, attractive color, and unusually little damage, it may be worth further investigation. If it is simply a normally circulated example, it can still be a wonderful historical collectible even if its market value is modest. The important thing is to know what you have before deciding what to do with it. Never clean it, never polish it, and never sell it solely because someone online has made a dramatic claim about a similar-looking coin. Take clear photographs, compare the coin carefully with reliable references, and if it appears exceptional, have it professionally evaluated. Next up, the 1937 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark is the Philadelphia issue, because cents produced at Philadelphia during this era did not carry a mint letter. That means the missing mint mark itself should not automatically be treated as an error, but it is still an important part of identifying exactly which version of the 1937 cent you have. This was a period when Lincoln wheat cents were still ordinary money, circulating through American stores, banks, pockets, cash registers, and households. These coins were never intended to become valuable antiques nearly 90 years later. They were designed to be used, spent, exchanged, and eventually replaced. Yet some survived far better than others. Your particular coin may have experienced years of circulation, or perhaps it was placed aside relatively early and protected from heavy wear. The difference can be seen in the details. Look carefully at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat, and the lettering around his portrait. Then turn the coin over and study the two wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent and United States of America. A very fine coin should show noticeable circulation wear, but many important design elements should still be clearly visible. The date should remain readable, the portrait should have meaningful definition, and the reverse should retain a substantial amount of wheat stalk detail. This is where the excitement begins, because the value of an old wheat penny is not determined by its age alone. Collectors consider the date, mint, condition, surface quality, color, originality, strike, and overall eye appeal. A 1937 penny that looks ordinary from across the room can become much more interesting when examined under magnification. So before you dismiss that little copper coin as simply an old penny, take a closer look, because nearly 90 years of history may be sitting right there in the palm of your hand. The condition of a 1937 Lincoln wheat penny is one of the most important factors to understand, especially when the coin is described as very fine. In coin collecting, very fine is a specific level of preservation rather than simply a compliment, meaning that the coin looks nice. A very fine coin has experienced circulation and will show wear on the highest portions of the design, but it should still retain considerable detail compared with a heavily worn example. On the obverse, inspect Lincoln's hair and facial features first. The highest points of the hair will usually show some smoothing, but there should still be enough definition to make the portrait attractive and recognizable. Look at the lines in the hair above and behind Lincoln's ear, the shape of his cheek and jaw, and the details of his coat. Examine Liberty and the date carefully because strong, readable lettering is an important part of the coin's overall appearance. Then move to the reverse, where the wheat stalks provide another excellent way to judge preservation. Look for the individual lines and contours within the wheat ears and examine the lettering for softness caused by circulation. At the same time, inspect the open fields for scratches, dents, stains, corrosion, or other damage. A coin can have good detail and still suffer from surface problems that reduce its appeal. This is especially important with old copper because many people have attempted to clean or polish these coins over the years. If you discover a 1937 penny, never scrub it, polish it, rub it with a cloth, or use chemicals to make it brighter. What may look like harmless cleaning can leave microscopic scratches and permanently alter the original surface. Collectors generally prefer naturally aged copper over artificially brightened surfaces. The coin's color should also be examined carefully. Natural brown coloration can be perfectly normal for a coin of this age, while reddish brown or remaining red coloration may have its own collector appeal depending on the grade and originality. The key is not whether the coin looks shiny, but whether the surfaces are authentic and attractive. A very fine 1937 Philadelphia cent with honest wear and natural surfaces can be a fascinating collectible, while an apparently brighter coin that has been aggressively cleaned may actually be less desirable. This is why looking beyond the date is so important. The tiny details tell the story of how the coin survived, and those details are exactly what collectors study when deciding how much attention an old penny deserves. There is another reason the 1937 Lincoln Wheat Penny can be an exciting coin to research, and that is the difference between original production and surviving condition. A coin may have been produced in large numbers, but that does not mean today's collectors can easily find examples in every grade. When the 1937 cents were released, they were ordinary circulating currency. Nobody knew that decades later collectors would carefully examine them under magnification and compare tiny differences in wear and preservation. These pennies traveled through an enormous number of transactions. They were carried in pockets, dropped on sidewalks, mixed with other coins, stored in drawers, exposed to humidity, and sometimes forgotten in places where copper could react with the environment. Every year of circulation created opportunities for scratches, dents, discoloration, and wear. Some coins were lost permanently, others were damaged or cleaned. A smaller group was saved by people who recognized them as collectible, and an even smaller group survived with exceptionally attractive surfaces and high levels of detail. This is where condition rarity becomes an important concept. The original number of coins struck is only one part of the story. Collectors also want to know how many examples remain in desirable condition today. If your 1937 no mint mark penny is genuinely very fine, it represents a survivor that still retains a significant amount of its original design after decades of circulation. That does not automatically make it extremely rare or extraordinarily expensive, but it does make the condition worth verifying. You should compare the coin with professionally graded examples rather than judging it only by photographs from random online listings. Lighting can dramatically change the appearance of copper, and digital photographs can hide scratches or exaggerate color. If your coin appears sharper than the typical very fine example, professional authentication and grading may be worthwhile. A respected grading service can verify authenticity and provide a standardized grade, giving you a much clearer reference when researching comparable coins. This becomes particularly useful if you suspect that your coin has been underestimated. Perhaps the hair detail is stronger than expected, the wheat lines are unusually sharp, or the surfaces are cleaner and more original than those of most circulated examples you have encountered. These small differences can matter. At the same time, it is important to remain realistic. A 1937 penny without a mint mark is not automatically a rare mint error simply because no letter appears beneath the date. For Philadelphia cents of this period, the absence of a mint mark is normal. The real question is how well your particular example has survived and how collectors value coins with similar characteristics. Color is another fascinating part of the 1937 Lincoln Wheat Penny story, especially because copper can change dramatically over many decades. When a Lincoln cent was freshly struck, its copper surfaces could have a bright reddish appearance, but exposure to air, moisture, handling, and storage conditions can gradually transform that appearance. Over time, a coin may become reddish-brown or deeper brown. Collectors and professional grading services recognize different color categories for Lincoln cents, and the distinction can matter when evaluating high-quality examples. But remember that color is not the same thing as grade. Your coin can be very fine and still have attractive natural coloration, just as a coin with impressive color can have problems that affect its grade. The most desirable combination is generally a coin whose surfaces are original, natural, and appealing for its condition. If you examine your 1937 penny and notice a consistent, naturally aged copper tone, that may be a positive characteristic. If instead the coin has an unusually bright mirror-like appearance that does not seem consistent with its age, you should investigate whether it has been cleaned or treated. Look closely around Lincoln's portrait and across the open fields for fine parallel scratches that could indicate polishing. Check the reverse around the wheat stalks and lettering for unnatural brightness or uneven coloration. Also inspect the edges and rims for dents or damage. A coin's appearance should be evaluated as a complete package rather than based on one attractive feature. This is especially important when someone claims that a certain old penny is worth a huge amount because of its color alone. Color can influence desirability, but it does not override wear, damage, cleaning, or grade. The same principle applies to the date. The fact that your coin says 1937 makes it historically interesting, but it does not automatically establish a spectacular market value. To determine what it may actually be worth, you need to identify the exact issue, determine the true grade, assess the surfaces and color, and compare it with documented sales of similar coins. If the coin appears exceptional, professional certification can be a useful step because it gives collectors an independent assessment of the coin's authenticity and condition. Until then, treat every valuation as an estimate rather than a guarantee. The smartest thing you can do with an interesting old copper coin is preserve it exactly as you found it while gathering reliable information about what you have. Now we arrive at the question every viewer is waiting for. What could a 1937 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark in very fine condition actually be worth? The honest answer is that the value can vary depending on the exact grade, color, surface quality, and collector demand, and a normal circulated example should not automatically be confused with an extremely rare top-grade specimen. The 1937 Philadelphia cent was produced in substantial quantities, so the absence of a mint mark is normal rather than evidence of an unusual error. typical circulated example may have a relatively modest collector value, while a much higher grade coin with exceptional preservation can command considerably more. This difference is one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. A date and mint mark identify the coin, but condition tells you how well it survived. Imagine placing two 1937 Philadelphia wheat pennies next to each other. Both have exactly the same date and both have no mint mark, but one is heavily worn, scratched, and discolored while the other has strong detail, attractive natural color, and remarkably clean surfaces. A collector is not going to view those two coins as equal simply because they share the same date. This is why you should be cautious about online claims that take a spectacular auction result and apply it to every coin from that year. Before believing any major valuation, ask whether the example was professionally graded, whether it had an unusual variety or error, what its color designation was, and whether the stated amount came from an actual completed sale. An asking price is not proof of value. A completed auction transaction is much stronger evidence because it shows what a buyer actually paid. If your 1937 penny appears to be a normal, very fine example, enjoy it as a historic wheat cent and a collectible piece of American history. But if it looks significantly sharper than expected, has unusually attractive original surfaces, or appears to be in a much higher grade than you initially thought, that is when professional evaluation becomes especially interesting. Do not clean the coin while you investigate it. Do not polish the copper. Do not scrape away dark areas. Preserve the original surfaces and compare the coin carefully with reliable numismatic references. A coin that has been damaged cannot simply be returned to its original condition, but a coin that has survived naturally can become increasingly interesting as you learn more about it. The most exciting discoveries often begin with a coin that someone almost ignored, followed by a closer examination that reveals details nobody noticed before. Next up, the 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark is the Philadelphia issue, because cents struck at Philadelphia during this period were produced without a mint letter. That means the absence of a mint mark should not automatically be considered an error, but it does establish the coin's mint origin and gives us a starting point for determining its collector interest. What makes this coin especially fascinating is the fact that it comes from 1939, a year sitting at the edge of a remarkable period in American history. The United States was approaching the beginning of the Second World War, and the Lincoln wheat cent had already been circulating for 3 decades. Millions of these pennies passed through everyday American life, traveling through stores, banks, pockets, cash registers, and households. They were ordinary money at the time, but today they can become fascinating historical objects because every surviving example has its own story. If your 1939 penny appears to be in very fine condition, the next question is how accurately that description fits the actual coin. Very fine means that the penny has experienced circulation, but still retains a significant amount of its original design detail. Lincoln's portrait should remain recognizable and well-defined, although the highest areas will show noticeable wear. The reverse should still display strong wheat stalk details and readable lettering. But condition is only one part of the story. Collectors also consider originality, surface quality, natural color, strike marks, corrosion, and overall eye appeal. A coin that looks attractive under proper lighting and has preserved its original surfaces can be far more interesting than another coin of the same date that has been heavily cleaned or damaged. So if you have a 1939 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark, don't simply put it away and forget about it. Take a closer look, because the tiny details on this nearly 90-year-old coin may tell you much more than the date alone. The first serious examination should begin with Lincoln's portrait, because the obverse can reveal a great deal about how much wear the coin has experienced. Place the 1939 penny under good, neutral lighting and slowly rotate it so that the light moves across the surface. Look closely at the hair above Lincoln's ear and around the back of his head. These areas receive considerable wear during circulation, so the amount of remaining definition can help you understand the coin's condition. Examine the cheek, jaw, coat, and the details around the lettering. The word Liberty should remain clear and the date should be sharp enough to read without difficulty. Then check the small area beneath the date and confirm that there is no mint mark. Again, for a Philadelphia 1939 cent, the lack of a mint mark is normal. After studying the obverse, turn the coin over and focus on the famous wheat cent reverse. 2 wheat stalks frame 1 cent in the center, while United States of America stretches around the design. A very fine example should still show considerable wheat detail, although the finest lines will have softened from circulation. Compare the definition of the wheat ears, the lettering, and the surrounding fields. Look for unusual scratches, dents, discoloration, corrosion, or signs that someone may have tried to clean the coin. This last point is extremely important because old copper coins are often damaged by well-intentioned attempts at cleaning. A person may think that making a penny brighter will make it more valuable, but collectors generally prefer original surfaces and natural aging. Scrubbing, polishing, abrasive materials, or chemical treatments can leave permanent evidence and may significantly reduce the coin's desirability. If your 1939 penny has a naturally aged brown or reddish-brown appearance, don't assume that the darker color means the coin is damaged. Copper naturally changes over time and the color can be part of the coin's character. What matters is whether the surface is original and whether the color is natural. If the coin has attractive surfaces, good detail, and relatively few distractions, it deserves to be preserved exactly as it is while you investigate further. Even tiny marks can matter when determining a professional grade, which is why collectors often use magnification and careful lighting rather than judging an old penny from a quick glance. The fascinating part about old Lincoln wheat pennies is that survival can matter just as much as original production. When the 1939 cents were struck, nobody knew that collectors nearly a century later would be studying their surfaces under magnification. These were ordinary circulating coins and they were treated accordingly. They were carried in pockets with other coins, dropped onto hard surfaces, handled by countless people, exposed to dirt and moisture, stored in drawers, and sometimes forgotten in less than ideal environments. Every year of circulation created another opportunity for wear and damage. Some coins were lost permanently while others became heavily worn. Some were cleaned or polished, and others developed environmental problems. A smaller group survived with attractive surfaces and stronger details, and those are the examples that can become much more interesting to collectors. This is why the original number of coins produced does not tell you exactly how many desirable examples remain today. Condition rarity can develop when the highest quality survivors become difficult to locate even though the date itself was not extremely scarce when originally struck. Your very fine 1939 Philadelphia penny represents a coin that has retained a meaningful amount of detail after decades of potential wear, and that alone makes it worth examining carefully. But you should be cautious when comparing it with spectacular examples shown online. A photograph can make a coin appear brighter, sharper, or cleaner than it really is, and lighting can dramatically change how copper coloration looks. If your coin seems significantly better preserved than typical very fine examples, professional authentication and grading may be worth considering. A reputable grading service can verify that the coin is genuine and assign a standardized grade, allowing you to compare it more confidently with other certified coins. This is especially helpful if you suspect that your initial grade may be too low. Perhaps Lincoln's hair retains more detail than expected, the wheat stalks are unusually sharp, or the fields are exceptionally clean for a circulated coin. Those characteristics can make the coin more interesting. At the same time, always remember that the absence of a mint mark is not itself proof of a minting error. For Philadelphia Lincoln cents of this era, no mint mark is exactly what you would expect. The real story is in the condition, originality, and specific characteristics of the coin sitting in your hand. Color can add another fascinating layer to the investigation. Lincoln wheat cents were made primarily from copper-rich bronze, and copper naturally changes as it ages. A coin that originally had a reddish appearance when it was freshly struck may gradually develop reddish-brown or brown coloration as it encounters air, moisture, handling, and different storage conditions. Collectors pay close attention to these changes because original color and surface quality can influence desirability, but color should never be examined separately from condition. A beautifully colored coin with serious scratches or cleaning damage may not be as desirable as a more modestly colored coin with excellent original surfaces. If your 1939 penny has an attractive natural appearance, examine it carefully rather than trying to make it brighter. Look across the fields around Lincoln's portrait and beneath the lettering. Rotate the coin slowly and watch how the light moves across the surface. Natural original copper often has a softer, more consistent appearance, while polished or chemically treated surfaces can display an unnatural brightness or fine lines that become visible when the light catches them. Check the reverse as well, particularly around the wheat stalks and the open areas surrounding 1 cent. You should also examine the edge and rim for dents or other damage. Every part of the coin contributes to the overall assessment. This is why professional grading can be so useful for potentially important coins. A grading service does not simply look at the date, it evaluates the entire piece including authenticity, wear, surface quality, and other characteristics. If your 1939 Philadelphia wheat penny appears to have excellent detail and natural color for its grade, it may be worth having examined by someone experienced in Lincoln cents. But don't let the excitement of a potential high value cause you to make a mistake. Never clean the coin. Never scrape off dark spots. Never use a household metal cleaner. Never polish the surfaces. Once original copper surfaces have been altered, the damage may be permanent. Instead, protect the coin exactly as you found it and focus on learning what it actually is. The most valuable discovery is not simply a high number attached to a coin. It is the knowledge that allows you to distinguish a normal example from an exceptional one. So how much could a 1939 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark in very fine condition actually be worth? This is where careful research becomes essential, because the market value of an old coin depends on its precise grade, surface quality, color, originality, and collector demand. A normal circulated 1939 Philadelphia cent should not automatically be treated as an extremely rare coin simply because it is nearly 90 years old. The lack of a mint mark identifies the Philadelphia issue, but it does not by itself create a dramatic premium. What can make a coin much more interesting is exceptional preservation or another legitimate collectible characteristic. This is why two coins carrying the exact same date can have very different market values. One may have been heavily circulated, scratched, cleaned, or exposed to environmental damage, while another may have preserved strong detail and attractive original surfaces. When researching your own coin, focus on completed sales and reputable numismatic references rather than simply looking at asking prices. Anyone can advertise a coin for an enormous amount, but an asking price does not prove that a buyer is willing to pay it. Actual completed transactions provide much stronger evidence. If you see an online claim about a 1939 penny selling for an extraordinary amount, examine the details behind the claim. Was the coin professionally certified? What exact grade did it receive? Did it have a special variety or error? What color designation was assigned? Was the transaction actually completed? Without those details, a headline can be extremely misleading. If your coin is genuinely very fine, it is an attractive historical collectible and a wonderful example of the classic Lincoln Wheat cent series. If, however, a closer examination suggests that it is much sharper than expected, has unusually clean surfaces, or has characteristics placing it in a substantially higher grade, then professional evaluation becomes much more interesting. Preserve the coin while you investigate it, because its original condition is part of its value. A professional opinion can help determine whether the coin is simply a nice circulated wheat penny or a much more unusual survivor. Either way, you are holding a small piece of American history that has survived from the years immediately before one of the most transformative periods in the nation's history. And that is what makes the search so exciting. You never know whether an ordinary-looking coin will turn out to be something worth remembering. Finally, if you have a 1939 Lincoln Wheat penny without a mint mark and it appears to be in very fine condition with attractive color, take your time before making any decision about its value. Confirm the date, verify that there is no mint mark, inspect Lincoln's hair and facial details, examine the lettering, and then study the reverse wheat stalks from several angles. Look for natural color and original surfaces while carefully checking for scratches, corrosion, cleaning, or other problems. Remember that the absence of a mint mark is normal for the Philadelphia issue, so the real mystery is not why there is no letter but how well the coin itself has survived. Nearly 9 decades of circulation could have destroyed much of its original detail, yet your particular example may have escaped some of that wear and still retain an attractive appearance. That is where careful grading and professional evaluation can make a difference. Don't clean it, don't polish it, and don't try to make it look newer. A wheat penny's age is part of its appeal, and the original surface can be one of its most important characteristics. If the coin turns out to be a normal, very fine example, it remains a fascinating collectible with a direct connection to everyday American life in the late 1930s. If it proves to be much better preserved than expected, then its collector interest could be considerably stronger. The key is evidence, not hype. Compare your coin with trustworthy examples, study completed auction results, and if necessary, have it examined by a qualified professional. Think about the journey that tiny copper coin may have taken since 1939. It may have passed through stores during a period of enormous historical change, sat in someone's pocket, been saved by a child, spent decades in a drawer, and finally ended up in your collection. That history is what gives old wheat pennies their special character. And while most examples will not reach extraordinary prices, the finest and most unusual survivors can attract serious attention from collectors. That is why every old 1939 Lincoln Wheat penny deserves a careful second look before you decide that it is just another old coin. For the exceptional example that reaches the extraordinary valuation collectors dream about, the final figure is $45,000.